I'm Graham Mann, and welcome to the Starting Stories podcast. On this podcast, we interview entrepreneurs, creatives, investors, and more to find out how they got started and the habits and learnings that made them successful so you can apply it to your own life. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an entrepreneur originally from Nova Scotia. I studied mechanical engineering at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, and went into entrepreneurship directly after. Along the way, I graduated from Founder Institute Montreal, worked for Techstars Boston, and my co-founder and I recently went through the Techstars New York program with our current startup, Lean Systems. Today's guest is Dave Culligan. Dave is a 25-year-old filmmaker and digital strategist who was born, raised, and is now based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He studied commerce at St. Mary's University in Halifax, where he also played football. Upon graduation, he led apparel company Be Human Clothing and decided to kick off his 365 project, where he made a 1-minute video every day for an entire year. From his early videos, some of which still have just a few hundred views, he's built an Instagram following over 10,000 people, videos that have over 180,000 views, and is now one of the widest known figures in Halifax. Dave is ambitious, energetic, and a relentless worker, and he's someone I'm lucky to consider a friend. In this episode, we get into his early motivation, mentorship, some things that are currently important in his life like gratitude, and finally, the new project he's going to be kicking off in 2018. Don't forget to check out the show notes with links to things we talk about, Dave's work, and more at grahammann.net/podcast. Please enjoy this episode with Dave Culligan. Hey, Dave, thanks for being on here today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into talking about career and related stuff, you mentioned one of your hidden hobbies is watching anime and cartoons. How do you get into that?
Cartoons, I guess, just comes with being a kid at one point. I think we all watched cartoons when we were growing up, but I think it was like when I was in university, I had met a friend who was from Korea, and he ended up living with me for about 8 months. And through university, I was like crushing every IMDb and Reddit, like top 100 movies list, like the top indie movies of like 2008. Like I felt like I had watched like every good movie out there that there was to watch for the past like 30 years. And then he introduced me to anime, which I had kind of written off as like some silly Japanese thing that people from here or only like weird people watch. And then I think one of the first ones that I watched was Spirited Away, which is one of the more like well-known ones. And then I started watching more by like Hayao Miyazaki, like Princess Mononoke, which is kind of well-known. And then like My Neighbor Totoro. And then I just kind of went down this rabbit hole of being like, oh my God, there's this whole genre of movies and films that I've never seen. And they're so different. It's just like exciting to kind of open up that whole world.
And you got a story related to anime about meeting a Korean friend at a bus stop?
Oh yeah, so my friend Hojin, who I met, I guess this was this period where I was just kind of looking to get into different things and meet different people, and I had like no money. I had a lot of negative money. I had a lot of debt from school, and I knew I wanted to travel, but it just like wasn't in the cards. So I started by like hosting a lot of couch surfers. So a lot of like Europeans would come like crash on my couch and hang out, and I would like show them around and then kind of like ask them about what it's like where they live. But I was just like standing at the bus stop and just complimented this guy like, hey, I like your boots. And he responded with an accent and said like, oh, thank you. And I said, where are they from? And he said, from Korea. And I said, is that where you're from? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, when did you get here? And he's like, 2 days ago. And I was like, do you have any friends? It's like, do you have any friends yet? And he's like, no, not yet. And I was like, well, do you want a friend? And he was kind of looked like sort of wary. I think like you'd probably be a little bit worried if that happened in somewhere else in the world, but maybe not necessarily here in a small town, small city. And I was like, well, you got a friend now, and took his number and ended up taking him out for dinner and kind of showing him around the city. And we ended up becoming really good friends after that. And he ended up actually, you know what, I'm going again down a rabbit hole with this story, but I don't know if you'll use this or not. But we were hanging out a whole bunch, and he was saying that he really didn't like the English as a second language school here because he was like, no offense, but my grammar is better than my understanding of the structure of the English language is better than yours. I just don't know
I'm
how
not
to
surprised by that.
I just don't know how to talk to people. He's like, I don't know like slang and like common speak. And I was like, well, how much do you pay them at your school? And he was told me the number, and I was like, man, if you give me half of that, I'll quit my job and you and I can hang out all summer and I'll teach you to speak English. And he talked to his parents, and then he did it and moved in, and we just like hung out and went camping all summer.
There you go. How to make friends and get a job. Tips from Dave Culligan.
And learn a little bit of Korean.
And learn a little bit of Korean. That is great. So just approach random strangers at the bus stop and compliment them on their apparel.
Yeah, just I don't know. just be nice to people and put yourself out there, I guess.
No, that's great. Okay, so I want to go back to the beginning, at least of I think your public story, which I think for you probably begins sort of at university. So maybe paint us a picture about you finished high school, you're planning to go off to university, you studied commerce at SMU. What were you thinking about how you chose commerce? What were you thinking about university, and what was your life kind of like at that time?
Yeah, so in high school, I had pretty good grades. I wasn't going to go into engineering or anything like that, but I had like low 90s, I think, average in high school. And I was like football captain and was all pumped up to go to university to play football. And I had this big dream of like, yeah, just going to play football at university. And I ended up going to St. FX for 2 years, where I kind of had my bubble burst, thought I was going to like step in and be a superstar right away. Didn't dress in my first 2 years. I mean, I definitely, among some other people, thought that I should have been, but just wasn't getting a chance. And then for several reasons, football and other things included, I ended up transferring to SMU to play football there. And then in our first exhibition game, had the most tackles in the conference, like name in the paper. Culligan leads St. Mary's defense. Don't dress the next game, and then dress like a few games that year, battling some injuries as well. And then the next year came back, like led the conference again by like a margin in tackles in our exhibition game. And then I'm like only on special teams the next game. And I was just like, holy shit, man. Like I've given my whole self and all of my time and all of my energy to this. And like, no matter what I put into it and no matter how I perform, I'm not getting anything out of it. So I was just like, at that point, I was like, holy shit, I can't be in this environment anymore. And there were some other issues as well. Like I was always interested in other things and wanted to try other stuff. But when you're a varsity athlete and you've got a school schedule and you've got a job, like there's no space to have anything else in there. And that culture doesn't really allow for much else other than just like football. So I ended up leaving the varsity football team after like our first or second game. And then at that point, it just kind of opened up the whole world. And I was like, holy shit, what am I going to do now? Like I had no idea who I was going to be or what I wanted to get into.
What did you play position wise in football?
I played corner. Yeah. Okay. Safety in high school.
And looking back, was it just chance that you wouldn't play the next game, or were there factors that you can see contributing to that? Because it sounds like you logically should have been playing all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't like a superstar by any means, but I think I performed, but I'm like 5'6". So that I had like 150 pounds maybe at the time.
Yeah. Okay.
So definitely undersized. And I mean, that's a sport where people take size seriously. That matters. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of got to the end of St. Mary's and you touched on it just now, I think, but sort of started to realize football wasn't going to be your whole life and you were interested in other things. What was that process like and when did that kind of start?
So it kind of started like right after I left football, and I think one of the very first things I did was I just started reading whatever I could get my hands on. So I was reading like graphic novels, like whether it was Batman or Watchmen or whatever. And I was also reading like Alan Watts, like more philosophical kind of stuff. Reading some business books, like just reading whatever I could get in front of me. and just exposing myself to some new ideas, because that wasn't really something that I was getting from anywhere else other than those books.
So you left football in your second to last year?
It was so I did one more semester in my fifth year. Like I took 3 courses, but I left in my 4th year. So
okay.
What would have been my last year? So
that last semester, you read a lot. What did you do when you graduated?
So I guess before I had graduated, I started reading, and then I decided like I wanted to teach myself to write code, and I started learning HTML, CSS on Code Academy. And then once I kind of took all the courses that they offered on those, I was like, well, now I need a project. I need to build something to see if I can actually use this. So I decided I'll build a website. And someone was like, you should build a blog website. This was a friend, Joel, who I had met at one of the hackathons at school, because I was just kind of throwing myself in whichever environment I thought could teach me something new. And I said, oh, hackathon, I know nothing about that, but I'll go. Met Joel, and he said, you should build a blog website. And so he helped me a little bit with that. And then I built the site, and it was sitting there, and I was like, well, I might as well do something with this. So through that, I started writing about, I guess, mostly my transition from kind of football bro-y dude to someone who wanted to be into other stuff. I didn't necessarily know what that was yet, but through that blogging and kind of putting myself out there, I ended up getting a job through a childhood friend in marketing. So managing marketing for a few liquor stores in town. And then I guess I got that job while I was still in school. And then just took on some more hours once I finished school, and that's sort of where I was right out of the gate, was at that company.
So you mentioned you started kind of writing, and the transition you were going through from being the football guy to something else. And I've heard you mention this before, the kind of identity crisis you had going through that time. I'm sure it was stressful. Was it a gradual process, or there was a day where it just clicked and you had no idea what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy I think, to look back and to try to paint it with some like romantic brush and try to make it seem like cooler or more of like a hero's journey than it really was. Like, it sucked. Like, I thought that people were going to think way less of me when I left football, and it wasn't like I had this immediate realization like, oh, everything's great now. It was like I struggled a lot with trying to figure out what I would say to people when they said, hey, what do you do? Because that answer was so easy for like the past 10 years. It was like, I'm a football player, and just like immediate like respect on some level from them. Like, oh, that's what he does. Cool. But then it was like, what do you do? And I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I just like I studied business, and I write, and I sort of take pictures here and there. And like, I don't know. Yeah, it took some time for sure. And even by the point that I'd had that job in marketing, like that was, I guess, like an easy enough answer. Yeah, I work in marketing, but like I wasn't satisfied with that. Like, I knew that I needed to find something that I was as proud of as I was when I got to tell people that I was a football player. Like, I needed something that I woke up and was excited to do in the morning.
And so part of this, I think, probably catalyzed your 365 project, but I think now might be as good a time as any to talk about imposter syndrome, which you've talked about before. Mm-hmm. What is that, and how did it relate to where you were at the time?
Yeah. So like, as far as I understand it, imposter syndrome is just kind of when an individual, and in this case, myself, I was thinking like, who am I to put myself out there? Who am I to tell people, to write a blog, and to think that anyone cares what I have to say? And I battled with that a lot. Like, when I first wanted to put that blog out there, I was so concerned about what people were going to think. And I guess just that practice of eventually taking the leap and just saying, I don't really give a shit what anyone's going to say. Like, I need this. That over time I got more comfortable with it. And now I think nothing of putting something out there.
Yeah. I looked it up after you mentioned it, and it's interesting in that traditionally it was perceived, and I'm reading from some of the research here, but perceived as an ingrained personality trait, but more recently has been studied as a reaction to certain situations.
Okay.
So it certainly sounds like for you, it was a reaction to that crisis at the end of university. But as time has gone along, it's, you've become more comfortable.
Yeah. And I think that like in terms of business, especially like where I'm located, like we're a kind of a small city that is, I guess, not known for trying to figure out my words here properly. Like large personalities aren't necessarily super welcomed. Like you're supposed to be humble, you're supposed to keep your head down. And so I think that it's kind of impressed upon you to sort of do your work and shut up about it. But
yeah, I mean, I agree. It's some more of the stuff from here. It's some of the characteristics are things like undermining one's own achievements, discounting praise, and imposter experience can present itself through thoughts such as, I feel like a fake, or I just got lucky.
Yeah. And I think that like to some extent we'll experience this for the rest of our lives. You just kind of got to learn to recognize it for what it is. And a lot of times it's nothing. It's just like some fear that's sneaking in the back of your mind. I mean, I've found myself in a room where I've been asked to speak to a group of students because whoever asked me to speak considers me to be an expert on a given subject. And there I am standing in front of all these kids who know nothing about it. Like I'm definitely the most expert in the room. And I'm like, why am I up here? But it's like, no, you worked on this a lot. Like you've studied this a lot and you know quite a bit about it. So like you should be here. But I think it's just funny. No matter what level you get to, you're probably going to feel some degree of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think probably it's funny when I read the sort of quotes that characterize, I'd never heard of it referred to as imposter syndrome, but you can, as you say, that's an example. I mean, I think we've probably all been in similar situations where we're asked to be the expert, I guess. And as you say, I think it continues as you go through life. You still find people who, by all measurable standards, are wildly successful, and they kind of get up there and like, I don't really know if I'm the one to be talking about this.
Yeah, exactly.
But, no, I find that very interesting. So you're doing some marketing for
Miko Companies was the name of the company. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, Miko Company. And you did that for a while, and then you became involved with Be Human clothing. Was that part of it?
Yeah, I guess that was, but preceding that, I guess, was a developing interest in photography and videography. And I was just kind of shooting some videos on my iPhone. And a lot of that was inspired by Casey Neistat, who I discovered and was just like enthralled with his story and work ethic and video style. And so I just started producing some videos, like just making them in my spare time. But I knew I needed an impetus to just make more. And I had watched some of Casey's videos and a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk stuff and a lot of these big personalities who were just saying, like, if you want to get good at something, if you want to develop a skill, just like do it all the time, do it more, make more videos, make more blog posts, whatever it is. And after battling with that for some time, I just made the decision that I was going to finally just make one every day. I was going to do one every day for a year. I was like, if I do this, if I put my head down and just create something every day and put it out there, like I'll undoubtedly get better at it. Like people will have to notice it if I put out almost 400 videos, and just who knows where I'll be at on the other end of that. And so I started while I was still at Miko Companies, and then it started to pick up a bit. I mean, within like 8 days, I was on the CTV news talking about it, and I was lucky to get some exposure pretty quickly. And then through that, I was connected with the folks at Be Human and sort of recruited to go run that company for a bit.
So the 365 project, for those who don't know, you just kind of outlined it, but you plan to produce a 1-minute video per day for 365 days, right?
Yeah.
Right. So when you went into the project, you made it public. You just said you were on CTV early on. Did you have a strategy for how you were going to stick with it? Like a conscious strategy? Because I imagine making it public helped you stick to it.
Yeah.
But was that something you did consciously going in or no?
Well, I knew that the like public accountability would be like pressure for me to keep doing it. But aside from that, no strategy. It was just like, if I just tell everyone that I'm going to do this, then I'll look like an idiot if I don't. And so I just like hurled myself into it. There was no like, oh, I'll do these types of videos or those types of videos. It was just like, hey, I'm going to do this. And then I was like, all right, guess I'm better buckle up.
Right. And I know it's difficult to make videos day after day. And I know you've talked about it, but I imagine it changed quite a bit through the project. So maybe just give us an example of a day where it was easy to make a video in the early days and a day where it was really hard. And then the same thing, except later in the project.
Sure. Yeah. So like when it started out, I hadn't made any yet, so I could make the video on anything. Like I could go to any park in the city, or I could go to any restaurant or place just around town and make a video about it because it was original for me anyway. But it was hard because I didn't know what I was doing editing. Like it would take me like 5 hours to edit like a 1-minute video that wasn't even that good. But then as it sort of progressed, I started to exhaust a lot of the sort of more interesting topics that I could cover around town. So it was like, all right, you've been to this park 3 times. You've been like, you've done this, you've done that. So I had to kind of be a little more creative in what the story was and what the video was, the actual content of it. Then producing it was easier because like I'd already made like 200 and I'd made a video every day for 200 days straight. It was like, all right, my editing is super streamlined. I can be really quick, but also you have to improve your editing. Like you have to get better at whether it's color grading or your style. So it's like you kind of hit like a point of diminishing returns where it's like, yeah, you've gotten so like quick and efficient at editing, but you've also got to improve at this point. It's not just about putting out the same thing every time. So just a constant, I guess, like back and forth in that regard.
And like, what was a really easy day late in the project to make a video for?
A really easy day late in the project. There were like a few crutch days, I'll be honest, where like, because I had started to take on quite a bit of like commercial work at this time. So I was busy with a lot of other stuff and I was like, oh shit, I've got to make this video. And I was like, well, I've got like hours of wicked drone footage from all around the province from the past like 300 days. Yeah. I could definitely just pull some like super awesome aerial shots and like slap those together in like 30 minutes and throw that up. And some of those, it's like kind of sucks when people are like, oh my God, this is the best one. And you're like, this was the least work. Like there's ones that I put so much work into and no one said anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was even one where I just like went to a doggy daycare and I just like kind of like sat down with a GoPro in my mouth and got mauled by puppies. And people were like, this is the best one. And I'm like, oh, like, thank you, but that really hurts.
Drones and puppies always sell.
Yeah.
You mentioned in an interview you did after the project with the coast that the friendships were your favorite part about the whole project. How did and the reason behind it was that those were going to last a long time past the project. But how did those friendships vary from the ones you had maybe earlier in your life, like in university, through the life you had then? And how are they similar, and how are they different?
Right. So, I guess like it's tough to compare them because a lot of those friendships, that I had when I was playing football, and some of them have lasted, some of them haven't, but like those friendships were based on a mutual interest in football and based on like being on the same team. And we were also younger at the time. So, it was like those friendships were good for that period of my life. But as soon as I started to realize like, hey, I want more, I want to try different things. I want to expand my horizons. Some of those friendships became limiting because I faced resistance when I wanted to explore those other avenues. But then once I kind of opened myself up and started to meet new friends and started to meet new people, I started attracting friends based on my new interests, which were like, I guess like creative exploration, or whether it was reading or film or whatever that was. I started to meet people who thought that my new ideas were great and who supported those. Yeah, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think, I have my own opinions on it and was kind of fishing for it there. But I think you expressed it well. I mean, I've had similar friendships from sports and so on in the past. But what happens when you stop playing competitive sports, or your interests shift, or you start working in a different area? And I don't know who said it first, but I think the quote that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with is certainly relevant there. So I think often it's important. Sometimes you need to make a conscious shift if you want to move in a new area, to actually shift your friends as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes they follow that order, sometimes they don't, but I think that's a good point.
And I wanted to be careful not to just like straight up shit on people, but it's like you go from people who, are stopping you from going where you want to go, and you move to a friend circle or a group of people who are like pushing you even harder to go like further than you wanted to go. So it's like you're not gonna get where you want to be if you stay around that kind of crowd.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a terrible thing to say to be like, I've moved on to these other friends, right? It's more of an evolution than it is like a rejection.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think that's extremely important. So I'm going to ask this question because I know you have an opinion on it. So the first part is what gear and tools do you use to shoot your videos? What did you start with, and how did that shift?
Right.
And then the one I'm sure you have an opinion on is, how much do you think gear and the related tools matter?
Yeah. I think like anyone who's spent any amount of time like researching video production, or who has spent any time in video production, like is gonna get like pissed off when they get asked what kind of gear they use. I mean, I know where you're coming from right now asking it, but I started out with my iPhone 5 or 6 or whatever it was at the time. And I filmed my first 130 days on that for all my ground footage. Anyway, there actually was a point where like I got my tax return and I went and bought a drone off of Kijiji for like $800. And I used that as well. So that helped for sure. But, like that was pivotal for me, just making the decision like, all right, you can't afford a camera. Just go and shoot something. And so I did that. And through that, those first 130 days was able to raise some money on a GoFundMe campaign to buy my first camera. So my proposition was sort of, hey, everyone who's been following this project and who's supported it, like, thank you so much. If you're really enjoying this and if you want to see more of it and if you want to see it improve, I'd love if you could make like a small contribution to this. I think I worked out like if you made a $10 contribution, it was like 5 cents per video per video across the project. And so I ended up raising like a little over $5,000 and was able to buy my first camera and a whole bunch of lenses and a GoPro and all that stuff. And like, that was wicked. But like, I have way more camera gear than I've ever had right now. And I'm making less videos than I was, like I'm producing less than I was when I had only the iPhone. And like, that makes me feel really shitty when I look up and I'm like, man, look at all this equipment. It's like, you're not even, yeah, but you're not even using it. It's like, it's literally on the shelf. So, I'm trying my best and I've got some,
bad timing.
It's all good.
Little musical interlude there.
Yeah. But yeah, I've got some exciting projects coming up in the new year that I'm trying to use as some forcing functions to have me producing more. And I'm trying not to lose sight of that grit that I had when I was using just the iPhone. So I want to take these tools and these new skills and apply them with that same kind of go-getter attitude that I had throughout that project.
Yeah, I think you just said it too. And, they're tools, right? So as you get better gear and so on, you have to recognize that they are still tools. And while they might produce slightly better video quality and so on, what really matters is the underlying story. So I'm going to force you to actually tell us what specific gear you did use during the project, having put the caveat first.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it definitely is interesting. So I have no problem with that. I used the Canon 80D was the body that I bought. And that's like an awesome camera for run and gun filmmaking, and like vlogging style stuff. Cause it's got the screen that'll flip and face you. The autofocus, is something that is like amazing. Like you don't have to pull manual focus. So it'll focus on the subject, automatically. It's super easily. And since then, actually I used the GoPro as well, which was super helpful for like being on my bike and stuff like that. But I recently bought the Sony A7S II, which is like a full frame, like $3,500, $4,000 body, and it's like a really high quality camera, like low light beast, but that autofocus is like non-existent essentially. So as much as you can get a way better picture, like quality, it's way harder to use. And if you're going to be using it all the time, and if you don't have time to be on a set and have people setting up lights and people like setting your focus depth and all this stuff, like it's hard to use. And sometimes I'm like, shit, maybe I should just use my iPhone, or maybe I should just use my like 80D, even though I have this way more expensive camera.
Right.
Time and a place for everything.
Sure. And what do you use for editing?
Final Cut Pro. Okay. Yeah.
And you get a bunch of point of view shots all the time. And you just mentioned you use your GoPro, but how do you actually get those shots?
I just put it in my teeth. Yeah. Everyone, people are like, oh, you can get like a helmet, like strap or whatever, but it's like, to me, that's just like so limiting. If it's in my hand, I can like move it around. I can point it exactly where I want it. I can put it down by my feet, and then I can kind of just chuck her back in my teeth.
I'm sure the dentists, if any dentists are listening, they're cringing, but do you actually have a mount for your teeth? Because I know they do exist now. Surfers seem to love them.
No, I don't. Like, is it like a mouth guard?
Yeah, it's like a mouth guard.
I don't have one of those. No,
you don't.
It's just got like the little tab at the bottom. It fits fits pretty well.
Well, there you go. Good to know. So you kind of culminated your 365 project with your short film, which is called The Way I See It. Mm-hmm. And I just want to dive into that a little bit. I saw it when you first debuted it and then rewatched it again the other day. And there's a few things. We touched on it earlier, I think, a little bit in terms of the attitude that's pervasive here. But you talked in the film, specifically, I think the quote was "have not" attitude here in Nova Scotia. And you hear things like "there's nothing to do here" or "there are no opportunities here," which is quotes from your film. Where do you think that comes from? And is it a Nova Scotia issue, or this is something that's experienced wider in rural communities or, places in general that aren't big urban cities?
Yeah. I mean, I've spent a lot of time personally and like amongst friends trying to like combat that attitude, but I can't say that I've spent a lot of time, and this might be the first time I've ever thought about like why that actually exists. And I mean, one thing that I tend to think of is like, I think for the past like 40 years to forever, if you wanted to work in a creative industry, if you wanted to work in a place that was innovative, if you wanted to do something different, you had to go away to a New York or a Toronto or an LA or something like that. There was no internet. Like you didn't have access to the information or the tools that we have now. So I think that for those past like forever, those people who were willing to think differently and to try new things, they left. And so I don't want to like mean any disrespect to the people who are still here, but like, I think that the people who have kind of remained around here and the environment that we've created is one that is much more conservative and plays it a lot safer. And there's nothing like wrong with that. That's not like a bad thing, but it means you're going to meet a lot more resistance when you try to push boundaries and when you try to think a little bit differently. And as challenging and as frustrating as that's been for me personally, I've learned to see that as both a challenge, but also an opportunity, because it's like, yeah, it's going to be a little harder to overcome those barriers, but also you're not in New York competing with like a million other copies of you who are just as talented or 10 times more talented and willing to work just as hard. So it's like you can make that splash.
Right. And you just mentioned it, and you also mentioned it in the film, but you spent time thinking about how to combat it. And you mentioned in the film that the solution is to be more supportive, creative, and inclusive. And I think everyone can take that their own way, but I'm going to put you on the spot again. What are some concrete examples of either each one individually, or you can address them as a whole, on how Nova Scotians in general can combat that attitude by being more supportive, creative, inclusive?
Okay. So, I mean, I
think your project is one example, right? I think it's certainly creative and was supportive in seeing a bunch of the businesses around town. And you included a bunch of other creators and local business owners and so on and so forth. So I think that's a good example.
Totally.
But if you're not going to do a video project, what are some other ways?
I think in a city like this that's growing so fast, and that there are so few, competitors in these like newer industries. Like there aren't very many like young people working on podcasts, or that's not to say that there aren't people doing a great job, but there aren't that many like young like video production companies or podcasts. And this is my world, so that's sort of what I understand, I guess, and even in like music. So it's like if I start a production company and there's another production company down the road, like we're not necessarily competitors. Like there's that saying, when the tides rise, all ships rise. So like if I do a great job and they do a great job down the street, like that's going to be beneficial for both of us, because more and more companies and more people in leadership positions who have money to pay these types of professions and for these services, they're going to recognize us as legitimate, and it's just like everyone wins. So I just think the more young people who are hustling and creative around here, and the more supportive they are of each other, then the better this environment's going to be for everyone.
Yeah, I think that was something too that I got the impression from your project was kind of a revelation for you, was how supportive people in the community were willing to be, whether it was local coffee shops or other creators. Totally. Or creatives in slightly different industries.
Yeah.
And I think a rising tide floats all ships is a great point.
Yeah.
In that, I think it benefited everyone that helped you on their project. And it certainly, I think you felt that benefit as well. And I think that exists across the board.
Sure. And one other thing that just kind of came up for me and that I'd like to mention, and I hope it doesn't get interpreted as coming from like a place of arrogance, but like there are a lot of times now, and like I've had a fairly, like from my perspective, a fairly like successful past year, and like things have kind of gone pretty well. Like I'm nowhere near where I want to be, or where I want to be in like 5 years, but I'll have people often like reach out to me and just say like, hey, we should do this, or we should work on this together, or that. And it's kind of like my mind immediately goes to like, what value is this person bringing to that? Because like I'm working on my dreams and I'm working on my things. So like, what are they bringing to the table? And then I kind of look back at myself a few years ago, and I was sort of doing the same thing. Like just kind of, wondered why these interesting people or people working on this or that weren't like bringing me in to work with them. It's like, they don't even know you exist. And like, then why would they? Like they're working on their own shit. So it kind of made me realize, if you want to be around people who are working on like big things and people who are dreaming big, it's like, you better bring something to the table. And that sort of was a big motivation for me in my 365 project, was like, if you want people to take you seriously, and if you want to be around people who are working on big things, like you better get to work. Like you better bring something to the table.
I think that's a good segue. We haven't really talked about it, but I know you developed a number of mentors through the 365 project, and they continue to help sort of shape where you're going.
Yeah.
And the point you just made about bringing some value to the table, I think is relevant. So tell us a little bit about some of the mentors that have played a role in that, and sort of what kind of position or they're in to help you, and how you developed those early relationships, and then what you do on an ongoing basis to continue to cultivate those.
Yeah. So I've got, I have a number of different mentors in different capacities. And it was something that I always knew that I wanted, but I think I was kind of looking in the wrong places, or just wasn't exposed to necessarily the right people for me. And I mean, you can have a mentor who's like strictly a business mentor who is just going to help you like excel in the most A-type fashion. But for me, the most helpful thing has been meeting mentors who both understood the business landscape that I'm kind of getting into, but also cared about me like as a person, and cared about my happiness, and wanted to make sure that I was doing what was right for me. And so that has been like extremely helpful. And do you want me to like say who they are? Or?
You don't have to mention them specifically. I'm just more curious, like often people strike out to find, and you mentioned it a bit, but find a digital marketing mentor.
Right. Yeah.
And this type of mentor. So you can, if you want, mention them by name or not, but sort of what kind of roles do they have? And
yeah, I will. So one of the first ones was a good friend of mine, Oleg Yefimov, who's from Israel, from Tel Aviv, which is one of the like tech capitals of the planet, as you know. And so I met him here through some kind of like tech startup events that he was organizing. And at the time I was still in school. I was like showing up in a suit, had no idea what I was doing, but I was just like, I want to meet people and I want to help. And I think I had just read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I was like dialed in on just helping people and like offering value. And so I ended up meeting Oleg and just saying, hey, can I help you in any way? Can I help out here? And I ended up volunteering with those events and befriending him. And he reciprocated that. And he really took me under his wing. And he was the first person who ever sent me to New York. I started doing some work with his startup. And that was the first time that I was exposed to like that world, like to a really big city and like a major tech scene I went to. It was an Israeli innovation festival in New York, and met all these like MIT professors and kind of people from Harvard and Cambridge and all these schools and these big thinkers, and was like, holy shit, like this is really cool. These are the kind of people, this is the kind of environment that I want to be around. And just being exposed to his like train of thought coming from a big city where there is no imposter syndrome. There is no like small town syndrome. It's just like, he's like, I'm going to take over the world. He's like, yeah, we're going to go to New York. We're going to go to LA. We're going to go to San Francisco. And like, we're going to build a $10 billion company. And just being around that attitude changed me a lot and changed what I thought was possible.
So that's super interesting. So when you first approached him, you met in person at this event.
Mm-hmm.
Had you done research before? Did you say, I noticed you work with this organization. Can I volunteer specifically for this role? Or did you literally just say, look, I'm interested in helping you out however I can. Is there anything I can do for you?
I think it was more, I don't think I was tactful at all about it. I think I was just like, can I help? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Probably like sweating.
Yeah. And then on an ongoing basis, like how do you keep that relationship alive and well?
I mean, well, it has, like I said, just become a friendship. And so like I've worked for him and I've helped him with some different things and continue to help with his startup or with whatever he needs and will continue to. And we've been on a few other like business trips together and just have become close friends. So it's not really work at this point. It's just more of a friendship.
Anyway. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And with other mentors, has that pattern repeated itself? Like you meet them somewhere and sort of say, how can I help? Or are there...
There was actually, so my other mentor, and I'll say his name right now. I'll ask him afterwards if he's okay with me using, but his name is Robert Zed, and he's like a business legend here in Halifax. And I played lacrosse with his son in football when I was growing up. He was a good friend of mine. And I always kind of knew that Robert was a successful businessman in town, but I didn't know the details of that, nor was I really interested at the time. I was so focused on my sports. But then as I was beginning to contemplate whether I could get into like digital strategy consulting or video production or whatever, I had no idea what that was going to look like. And I was like, who can I talk to about this? And I was like, I thought to myself, Robert is a businessman. Like he knows how to ask people for dollars. Maybe I could talk to him. And so we ended up getting a coffee together. And this was one of the first times really that in a meeting like this, and I had coffees like that several times with like lawyers or whoever it was before, very like successful people by some standard. But this was the first time that someone asked me like, what's going to make you happy? Like what is important to you, whether that's like family or relationships or whatever it was. And that really struck a chord with me. And that relationship just sort of blossomed from there. And I think when you mentioned earlier bringing value to the table, it's not that I was successful at this time, or it's not that I like had money or necessarily any like specific skills, but I think it was actually in I've got Ryan Holiday's book here sitting here that you just gifted to me, perennial seller. But I think I read in one of his blog posts that one of the most important things, and I read this after this relationship had developed with Robert, but read that people want to give back and they want to help like the younger generation, but you've got to show them that you're going to take that help and that you're going to take their advice and run with it. And I think he just saw some of the tenacity in me and saw that if he gave me tools that I would use them. And I think that was really important in developing that relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, 99% of the experiences I've had with extremely successful people who you wouldn't think have a minute in their day is that while it may be tough to get that first meeting, they absolutely love and enjoy helping other people out and, dispensing advice. So I think that's a great point as well. Being coachable and showing that you're willing to take their advice to heart is a big part of maintaining those relationships.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you've had experiences like this, but I've had some young, whether they're filmmakers, photographers or whatever, just ask me for advice. Like, hey, what do I have to do? And I'll give them like the blueprint. It's like, well, you got to just make more and work really hard and like do it every day for a month and see how that happens. And oftentimes it's like, oh, well, that would be hard. And it's like, at that point, I'm just like, well, that's the answer. So I don't know if you're looking for like a shortcut, but yeah.
Yeah. You certainly have to be willing to work for it, I think.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
You're killing the segues today. So you just mentioned that this was the first time you'd found someone who sort of mentioned what's going to make you happy. Is it going to be related to business or not? And to kind of wrap up talking about your short film, which we've been diverging a bit, but one of the themes throughout the film, I think, was, and I think this again was another quote, I choose to feel optimistic. When did you really make that realization that that was a choice? And was there something specific that sort of triggered that for you, or was it a gradual realization?
I don't know that there was like a moment that I could pinpoint where I made the shift, but I know one huge learning curve for me was when I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So he was a Holocaust survivor who developed logotherapy, and he talks about how he was in these concentration camps and he was able to kind of remove himself from that environment in his mind and kind of find meaning in that moment and to choose his own attitude. And that literally helped him survive while some other people weren't so fortunate. And obviously that's a much more extreme version of what I was dealing with. But I feel like I had some very like negative thoughts and some very negative self-talk. And I was at like rock bottom, and I just made the decision like, this needs to change, and I have no choice really but to just look for the positive, because right now things aren't getting better, and if I want them to, like, I just need to take control of this.
Yeah. And I think you've also mentioned that gratitude plays a big role in your life now. Mm-hmm. So having made that realization, how do you now view gratitude and how do you incorporate it in your life?
Yeah, I think it's about perspective, right? Like if you're constantly thinking about what you don't have and and what you want, it's like you're gonna be in a position of like the glass is half full, or for lack of a better term. But if you're thinking about how fortunate you are, whether it's to have your health or to be, in my case, surrounded by some great people, it's like I've got it pretty damn good. And that doesn't mean you have to be complacent. It's not like, all right, I've got it good, so I can just coast. It's like, wow, how fortunate am I to be in this position? I should take advantage and really like seize this opportunity.
And do you have any formal practices to really cultivate that? Like, I know some people write down 3 things every morning that they're grateful for, or something like that. Or is it more a shift in mindset that you try to maintain?
It's been pretty informal. I've tried stuff like that. I've tried morning journaling. I've tried just kind of waking up and making sure I spend some time just thinking about what I'm grateful about before I touch my phone. But, I'm needing more structure in that sense. And so that's part of what I'm planning for the new year is a much more formal, gratitude practice through journaling. Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into what you've got planned for the new year, a few things that I found interesting from the video as well. One of the small changes you mentioned making was when you got a bike.
Mm-hmm.
How did biking change your life, or what makes biking special for you?
I think that for me, like just being outside and just getting your, like, the blood flowing in your legs, like, and in your body, that's one thing from a very like rudimentary standpoint. But I think when you talk about gratitude, or when you talk about seeing challenges as opportunities, or you talk about perspective, it's like, if you've got a 20-minute bus ride or car ride to work, for me, like, if I'm in a bus or if I'm in traffic in a car, like, I'm just thinking, fuck, like the whole time it's just like, this sucks. like, and you just like, you spend 20 minutes programming your mind to just like feel shitty on your way to work. But for me, when I get on my bike, it's like, yes, like I love this. I love feeling the wind against my face. I love like kind of dipping through traffic, and like it wakes me up. It can almost replace like my coffee on the way to work. So I see that journey that would otherwise be like a burden as like one of the most fun parts of my day, like when I'm commuting anyway.
And you also mentioned yoga is something that plays a role in your life these days. What is it, similar to the biking, or it plays a slightly different role?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got like insanely tight hips, so it helps from like a more basic standpoint there, just on like flexibility and like physical comfort. But in terms of centering myself and just kind of calming down, it's like I'll go into a class just being so wound up and so concerned with all these like things that seem so important when I go in, and then I step out and I'm like, yeah, like it'll be all right. It's like, I'll get those done. And it just refocuses me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, when I do yoga, aside from also having tight hips, which seems to be a problem in specific sport athletes once they get older, I find it meditative, and I think it calms the mind.
Absolutely.
Have you tried meditation or other forms of calming the mind, and have any worked for you?
I have. I've got like a few guided meditations that I've like gone back to over time. For me, some of my most meditative moments have come through yoga, or through cycling, or through floating, like different practices like that. I want to maybe take a crack at more committed practice to transcendental meditation in the new year, but I tend to find those moments of flow or clarity through physical activity mostly.
Did you find this? This is just a random thought occurring to me, but when I stopped playing competitive sports, it took me a while, like probably at least a year, to really figure out. Like, there was a void that was left when I stopped playing competitive sports. Did you find that? And then do things like biking and yoga, do they help fill that, or it's something different?
Yeah, I think they definitely help fill that. And I think it's not like when I was 15 and playing hockey or football, I was like going there and be like, man, I can't wait to find my flow. Can't wait to like get zen at hockey practice. But you were like, you got your blood pumping, you got your heart pumping, like you were around your friends, like you were just exercising, and that probably was meditative for you in some given way. But once you stop that, the confusion of not having the words or like the understanding of what that feeling is, like just being like, man, I feel really wound up and I have all this anxiety, but just not being able to like articulate that or understand it, I think is extremely frustrating for a young person who's trying to figure out a million other things.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, as you say, I would never have pointed to hockey when I was like 15, 16 and said, yeah, that's
Exactly.
need to calm my mind. But it became evident when you finish.
Totally.
Because all of a sudden you're missing that. And
yeah,
it does take a while to find it. But I've had similar experiences with yoga or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Tattoos. You got a number of them.
I've got a couple.
I'm curious about the form of them, but do you want to talk quickly about which ones you have and where they come from?
Sure. I'll pull my sleeve up here. They're all pretty simple, and like I waited quite a while to get tattoos. I remember like when I was a kid, a lot of my friends were getting them when they were like 15, and I was like, man, my mom would kill me if I got a tattoo. It was kind of funny. After I got the first one, it's like who really cares? But I was in China with my friend Oleg, who I just mentioned. We were in Guangzhou, which is like I think maybe the third largest city in China. We were there for an innovation festival, and I had like 2 extra days at the end, and I was like, man, I really want to go see Hong Kong. So I took a train down there, ended up staying with a friend of my cousin's who she had worked with when she lived there. And I went out to a restaurant that she recommended, and I was just having a really good time. And at a place called Yardbird in Hong Kong, if anyone's going there, it's really awesome. And I saw the bartender had really cool tattoos, and I was like, man, where'd you get those? And he said, down at a place called Galaxy down the street. And I said, could you give me your tattoo artist's number? I want to text her right now. And I just said, like, can I come in and get a super quick tattoo tomorrow? And she was like, yeah, what do you want? And then I was like, oh yeah, I have to actually pick what it's going to be. And I was just having such a good time in Hong Kong, and I knew I only had like a day and a half there. I was like, I need to come back here. So I wanted a reminder, and I just got the word East across my arm. So like, to me, that represented my fondness for my hometown on the East Coast of Canada, but also my first time in the Eastern part of the world. And then I kind of went in, and she was like, how do you want it written? I was like, just scribble it. I don't really care. And she wrote it, and I liked it. And then from that point on, I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this every time I have a moment like this, like something that I want to remember, or like a place that I travel to, and just kind of turn this arm into sort of a stamp book.
So do you just want to, you don't have to, but
yeah, sure.
if you want to run through each one you got here, maybe we'll add a picture to the show notes or something.
Sure.
But
I've got Go on my arm as well, just in plain text. That one was in Brooklyn. And so to me, that signifies the fact that New York was the first place that I ever traveled to alone, and also signifies kind of that like go, go, go attitude that is present there. And that's something that I want to maintain myself. Like I want to always be moving, like go on a trip, go build a business, go work on a project, whatever that is. And then I've got some tally marks that say 365. So that's just to kind of commemorate that crazy year that was so formative for me. And to me, it kind of signifies that attitude of like working every day and like always being moving again. Then I've got a lowercase b. My little brother's name is Braden, so it's lowercase for like little brother. He's got an uppercase D. He's got the big D. Nice. So I got that in Montreal when I was visiting him. And then on my forearm on the other side, I've got life will always be beautiful again. And so that was, it's in the writing of one of my best friends, Jeremy Saunders, who was speaking at TEDx Toronto. And he was up there to speak on kind of changing the narrative around death and how people view life and death. And he had just gotten over a really severe, I guess, like battle where he was sick and had just had like 70% of his large intestine removed, and it was like one of the most like shitty and painful times of his life, and that guy's been through a lot of shit. And then here he was a few weeks later, like standing in his power, like standing ovation at TEDx, like absolutely killing it. And so I asked him right after his talk, I handed him a piece of paper and said, write down the first thing that comes to mind. And this was what he wrote down. So just wanted to sort of capture that moment forever.
And they're all very simple. And I guess you kind of mentioned it, but is there an underlying meaning behind the form?
Like the simplicity?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's kind of just like, it's to not take life too seriously. It's like you want to take yourself seriously and you want to take your career seriously and you want to work hard, but also like, this is just skin. This is just my arm. Like I'm going to die. Might as well just do create a bunch of memories and like have fun with it. And then, yeah, that's sort of what the style, I guess, represents for me.
Right. Okay, cool. So you've been doing freelance work since you wrapped up the 365 project.
Yep.
And I know you have some big things planned for 2018. A recent Instagram post, you mentioned traveling, exercising, and creating will all play a big role in those plans. So I'm interested in each, but maybe let's start with creating.
Yeah.
What's on the horizon?
So yeah, I'm going to be launching my second, I guess, volume of the 365 project. So I'm going to call that 365 2.0, and the focus will be brain, body, business. So focusing on like my brain, my mind, my happiness, my mindfulness, learning. So doing lots of reading and sharing some thoughts on that sort of thing. And then body. So taking care of myself physically. So whether that means more yoga, push-up challenges, like some calisthenics, whatever, just focusing on making sure that I'm committed to that and sharing some of that as well. And then business will be perhaps the greatest focus for the year. And that's just documenting my first year of actually launching a production company. And none of this will be presented from a perspective of like, hey, look how much I know about this, or I'm going to teach you how to do this. It's just like, here I am, just a dude with no special skills or position or anything like that, just trying to make it happen. And do you want to like follow along and sort of sharing this with me?
So this is going to be another series of videos?
Yeah. So rather than limiting myself to just like a short video every day, or rather than inundating myself with like a long format vlog every day, which like would probably just be both too much and for me and probably for viewers, I'm going to commit to a piece of content every day. So whether that's a short video or a long form vlog where I kind of share some of the challenges or accomplishments from that week, or like a travel vlog, or it could be just a photo that I've taken, or it could be a blog post, whatever, just like kind of gives me some flex to share in different formats, but also keeps me committed to putting something out there every day.
Cool. And this starts January 1st?
January 1st. Yeah.
Okay. We'll put some links to where you can go check out that stuff in the show notes. So new production company.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was actually meeting with my mentor, Robert, like maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. And I really enjoyed my like kind of downtime and break after the 365 project, the last one. It gave me the kind of mental space and breathing space to, I guess, like rethink what I wanted to do and to just like get on my bike a little more, like spend some quality time with friends, go on a few dates. And then I was in this place where things were great. Like I was happy. Like business was good, money was good, but like, I just felt this like comfort that was kind of gross. It was like kind of this like stagnance. I didn't feel like I was really growing. I just was kind of like in this comfy zone, and I was like, this is so not me. This is so not why I had go tattooed on my arm. Like I need to be moving. And I kind of shared that with Robert, and he gave me a very much needed kick in the ass and said like, well, you better get going because you've got some momentum right now from your past project, but that's not going to last forever. No one's really going to give a shit that you did that if you wait another year from now. And so I had a whole bunch of travel plans, but I was like, you know what, I can put those off for a little bit. I'm just going to focus on building a business. I made the decision that I was going to build a team, and within a few days, I'd built a team of 3 and had already started looking at some office space and just wanted to create some forcing functions. Like, all right, you're going to do this. I'm going to build this.
So you guys are going to be based in Halifax. What sort of projects are you looking at working on?
Yeah, and so we're based in Halifax. Right now, we're focused on finishing up a project that I had begun on my own with the Saltwire Network. So they own a lot of pretty much all of the major papers here in Atlantic, Canada, doing a bit of a mini documentary series that'll be coming out in the new year with them. So that's really exciting. We've got another mini documentary we're going to be shooting on the Bramber Weir in the valley. So that's an indigenous fishing practice that's been done for like hundreds of years, and they're partnered with the Minas Institute down in the valley. So that one's going to be kind of fun. I'm off to Australia in mid-January to shoot with a company called Austrek to film some universities over there. So that's super exciting. And that's kind of a dual opportunity triple opportunity to just travel and go see a new place, but also to create some vlog content about being over there. And then also like actually producing commercial content for a company. Yeah. So that's some of the stuff we have in the pipe right now.
Awesome. Lots of things coming. And the name of the company?
365.
365.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
we'll link that as well.
Sure. Yeah. I was kind of hesitant to make it that, but I talked with some of my team members, and one of the guys brought it up, and I was like, you don't think that's too cheesy? And he said, no, let's do it. So it's like, all right, it's got a little bit of momentum right now. Let's just do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know. I think it's a great name. I mean, I think it relates back to where you got your start. It's got some connotations on how much you guys work and all sorts of stuff. So I think it's great.
And I don't think that stuff's worth overthinking anyway, right? It's like I started to overthink the logo as well. And it's like, if you look at Nike's logo, like that's not a cool logo necessarily. It's cool because Nike is cool. It's cool because they do cool shit. It's cool because they make cool work. So focus more on just doing good work. And I think that the logo and the name will take care of themselves.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, I think it's analogous to the gear situation, right? It's
exactly,
like, it matters a bit, but ultimately it's going to be what you produce.
Exactly.
So I want to be respectful of your time. We'll wrap up with some quicker questions here. What was your favorite trip from this year?
Favorite trip from this year? Oh man. Was Hong Kong this year? Was it? I had a really wicked trip. You know what? I was in Hong Kong. I was in San Francisco. I was in New York. But my favorite trip was a 5-day trip to Cape Breton with 2 of my good friends, where we just camped out every night and did some amazing hikes. And it was just like, we were mind blown. Even my friend, who's been to almost every country in Europe, has been all around the world. He's been through Australia. We were kind of sitting there having a fire and looking around, and he was like, man, I think this is the coolest trip I've ever been on. So that was an awesome one.
Some of the best hidden gems are right at home.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next place you want to visit and why?
Next place I want to visit,
excluding Australia, since you're going anyway.
Yeah. Korea is a big one for me because my friend Hojin is there, and that's within proximity to Japan and Tokyo, which I really want to see. So, those spots in Asia for sure.
That's a good answer. Best hike in Nova Scotia.
Best hike in Pollett's Cove.
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't put that one out there because it's kind of secret, but I dare you to go do that hike.
Not
it's really
so
hard.
Secret.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a challenge to everyone who's listening. What's the worst advice you see or hear being dispensed in your industry?
The worst advice.
And you can define how you see your industry, but
yeah, media production is probably the worst. The worst advice for me is just anytime you're convinced to like wait. Anytime someone's like, well, you should think about this more, or like you should work on your package or your website or whatever. Like anytime people are convincing you that you're not ready for something, it's like you're better off just getting in there and figuring it out.
Yeah, it's surprising how often it happens that the one thing you keep planning for or putting off is the single thing you actually need to be doing.
Exactly.
Do you have a quote you live by or think about often these days?
I don't know about a quote. Yeah, actually, you know what? I mean, honestly, it's not even a quote. It's like it's 2 words, but I have a little cardboard piece up above my desk that just says "do push-ups," and it's like literally just like anytime I'm kind of like sitting around and I'm feeling unmotivated, I just like get down and pump out a few push-ups, and it kind of brings me back to my like grittier like hockey days from when I was like 12, like getting ready for tryouts, like doing push-ups. And it's just like, to me, it just signifies like just working hard. It's like, you don't need any weights. You don't need anything special. It's like, just get down and give me 20.
Yeah. Well, I think it might be Tony Robbins too, whose philosophy is something like, if you want to change your mind, you have to change your body, just implying that like, if you're feeling lethargic, you can't think, etc. If you change your body state to being one that's energized and so on, then often that has the effect of changing your mind too. What you mentioned, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. What are another 1 to 3 books that have influenced you significantly over the past few years?
So there's Man's Search for Meaning. As I look at this Ryan Holiday book here, Ego is the Enemy was really good. I felt like it called out a lot of my bullshit the kind of stories that I've told myself over the years. Those I want to think of. Something a little bit more esoteric, I guess, would be the book, The Taboo Against Knowing Who You Really Are, or The Taboo Against Knowing Yourself by Alan Watts. That one was really cool. It's a little esoteric. It's a little bit more out there, a little more philosophical, but I thought that one was really cool in kind of discovering who I was and what I wanted.
Okay. One last one here. What advice would you give to a smart driven college student who's about to graduate and enter the real world?
Just if you're not sure what it is you want to be doing, just do everything. Like, don't be worried about filling your plate up too full. You can always kind of chop away afterwards. I think so many people are worried about like taking on too much or worried about figuring out what it is they want to do before they do anything. But it's like, you're not going to figure it out just like hanging out. You gotta do stuff, and don't be afraid to work for free. Don't be afraid to like go sleepless. Like, just that's not going to be sustainable forever. But the most important part is like getting your arrow pointed and figuring out what it is you want to work on. And then after that, it's just work.
Do a bunch of things and figure out which ones you like later.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this. What's the best place for people to reach you or find your content online?
Instagram, I think, is the big one for me right now. So just at Dave.Culligan, and I've got an email button there if you want to reach out through that. But yeah, pretty easy to get to.
Sure. We'll link all of Dave's channels in the show notes. Thanks again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Just a reminder, you can find show notes, links to everything we talked about, and more at grahammann.net/podcast. And I would encourage you to sign up for my weekly email list to make sure you get notified about new blog posts and podcasts. See you next time.